The black ribbons were already tied to the colliery gate when Clara Mowbray was ordered onto the weighing platform. 20 ribbons moved in the February wind, one for each man still entombed beneath Brierley Moor. Their widows stood below in borrowed mourning, faces gray with cold and sleeplessness. Behind them crowded miners with clay dried white on their boots, shopkeepers, parish officers, and children too young to understand why the pit bell had stopped. On the platform, Sir Edmund Vane held a folded report, as though it were a judgment delivered by heaven, rather than 3 pages prepared in his own office. "The eastern workings flooded because the drainage calculations were false," he announced. "Those calculations bear the hand of Miss Clara Mowbray." Clara did not look at the crowd. She looked at the plan Sir Edmund had pinned to a board. The blue lines showing the watercourses were hers, but the figure beside the low founder seam was not. Someone had changed a 6 to an 8, raising the supposed safe water level by 2 feet. It was a small alteration, expertly done, and from 10 paces no one would see it. "That is not the drawing I submitted," she said. A murmur passed through the yard. Sir Edmund's manager, Josiah Bell, lowered his eyes with the solemn patience of a man enduring indecency. "Your father supervised the pumps," Sir Edmund continued. "He left his post before the inundation. You prepared the measurements upon which he acted." Clara's brass dividers pressed through the cloth of her pocket into her palm. Her father had taught her to take levels before she could write a proper hand. "Water did not lie," he used to say. "Men lied about water because they believed it carried away the evidence." Matthew Mowbray had not come home on the night of the collapse. His body had not been found. The company had declared that he fled after neglecting the eastern pumps. Clara knew only that his oilskin coat remained in the engine room and that the small tin box in which he kept his shift notes had disappeared. Sir Edmund held out another paper. "Sign your acknowledgement and the company will pay you 3 months' wages and refrain from pursuing damages." The sum would have bought food and lodging until summer. Clara had 8 shillings, a valise, her father's tools, and no reference. Yet the words on the page confessed that she and Matthew had knowingly endangered the men below. She placed the paper on the platform rail. "I will not sign a lie." Bell produced a cracked leather folder. "Then the company discharges its debt by transferring the old East Brierley pumping station and its attached acre. Your father held a deferred wage claim against it. The boilers are condemned, the leat is choked, and the rates exceed any income. You may consider it the fruit of his management." Cruel laughter came from somewhere behind the coal wagons and died at once. Clara accepted the deed because refusing it would erase the only debt the company admitted owing Matthew. The key laid upon it was long, rusted, and cold enough to sting. "My calculations assumed the old relief adit remained open," she said. "Your report omits it." Sir Edmund's expression changed by no more than a tightened eyelid. Bell answered for him. "There has never been such an adit." Mary Hesketh, whose husband and eldest son were underground, stepped from the widows. "Then why did your father mark one?" she demanded of Clara. "Why did he promise Ben the water would turn?" Clara could not answer without the missing notes. Mary's grief struck more deeply than Sir Edmund's accusation. She descended from the platform through a lane of people who drew their coats away from her. At the gate, 12-year-old Tom Hesketh stood clutching his father's dented bait tin. "You killed them," he whispered. Clara walked east until the pithead vanished behind sleet. The abandoned station stood a mile beyond the active works, where the moor fell toward black reed beds. Its chimney had lost 6 courses. Slates lay in the grass like dark cards, and one end of the engine house had sunk toward a stagnant collecting pond. A demolition notice, dated 5 days hence, was nailed across the door. Inside, the great beam engine rested at an angle beneath a webbed skylight. The cylinder was orange with rust. The flywheel sat in water. Frost silvered the coal dust. On the north wall, a vertical brass and ivory flood gauge remained connected to a narrow copper pipe descending through the floor. The company report claimed East Brierley had been isolated 9 years earlier, so the gauge should have been dry and dead. Its black float stood at 13 feet 4 inches. Clara wiped the glass. The official drawing fixed the water on the night of the collapse at 15 feet 8. Yet a pale tide mark crossed the gauge housing at 12 feet 11, and beneath decades of corrosion, the retaining screws showed bright crescent scratches. Someone had opened the instrument recently. She knelt, set her father's dividers against the scale, and heard water moving under the floor. It was not the random dripping of a ruin. 3 slow pulses traveled through the copper pipe, paused, and came again. The station was still connected to the mine. Clara spent her first night in the former stoker's room because it was the only chamber with an intact door. She stuffed sacking into the broken window, made a fire from fallen roof battens, and ate half a heel of bread. Every quarter hour she marked the gauge level in her notebook. It rose 2 inches by midnight, fell 1 at 2 in the morning, then rose sharply before dawn. No rain fell. Whatever fed it was controlled. At first light, she traced the copper sensing line under loose flags. It ran north, although the surviving company plan showed all drainage pipes leaving west for the river. In the yard, reeds concealed a stone channel built with an unusually steep fall. Its mouth had been sealed by newer brick, but the lowest course sweated warm water. She was measuring the mortar when a voice said, "Demolition men will not care where your boundary lies." Elias Rook stood beyond the fence with a basket of tools. He was 50, narrow-shouldered, and missing 2 fingers from his left hand. Clara remembered him as an engine fitter dismissed after a boiler dispute. He had worked beside her father for 18 years. "Did he abandon his post?" she asked. Elias looked toward the distant headgear. "Matthew went where Bell sent him." "Where?" "He did not tell me. He asked for a chain wrench and the old east key." Then Bell ordered everyone out of the pump room. Elias nodded at the sealed channel. "That culvert was called Hannah's Cut when I was an apprentice. Company renamed it a surface drain, then bricked it after the new shafts opened." The word Hannah stirred a memory. Her father had once shown Clara a tiny H scratched beneath a brass valve wheel. He said it honored the woman who understood the moor before engineers came with titles. Elias did not offer help. "Mary Hesketh says her Tom is not to come near you. Others will say worse." "I need no kindness. I need to hire a hammer and cold chisel." He studied the demolished roof and her thin shoes. "Tool hire is 6 pence a day. I have spares for 4 pence, paid when you can." It was not kindness, but it was a beginning. Clara cleared the stoker's room, patched the grate with fire clay, and sold her spare dress for 12 shillings. 4 went to arrears on the attached acre. 3 bought oats, bread, lamp oil, and sacking. She reserved the rest for materials. She did not touch the bricked culvert. Opening an unknown watercourse alone could drown the station or the workings beyond it. Instead, she surveyed. The yard sloped south by 1 foot and 27, while the floor pipe ran north against the fall. The collecting pond was only 3 feet deep, though its retaining wall descended at least 9. A length of chain lowered through a broken grating struck not mud but an iron plate. On the second afternoon, Tom Hesketh appeared carrying a message from his mother. He kept outside the fence. "Mr. Bell says you stole company drawings," he said. "These are my own measurements. Ma'am says you are to stop asking about father." Clara saw that his boots were splitting and that he had walked through sleet. She poured hot tea into a tin cup and placed it on the gatepost without approaching. "Your father spoke to mine before the collapse. Do you know why?" Tom's mouth hardened. "He said the sump was singing." Among miners, a singing sump meant water forced through a narrow crack under pressure. Clara asked when he had said it. "Tuesday. He came home wet to the waist, though his level was dry." Tom took the tea after a long hesitation. "He said Mr. Bell told them to break through old brick beyond the low founder." The official report stated the collapse began after an unforeseen fault opened naturally. Brickwork meant an older constructed passage lay beyond the seam. Before Clara could ask more, a carriage stopped on the road. Bell stepped down with a constable and handed her an injunction forbidding interference with any underground connection belonging to Vane collieries. The station and acre were hers, he conceded, but the company claimed every pipe, culvert, and water right beyond the boundary. "You have until Monday to vacate before demolition," he said. "The chimney endangers the public road." "The road is 90 yards away." "A company surveyor has certified the risk." Clara examined the certificate. The surveyor was Belle's brother-in-law. More importantly, the deed described her eastern boundary as the Old Stone Race to its junction with Hannah Beck, not the fence erected after closure. If the buried race survived, her acre might include the pond and northern channel. "I shall ask the parish to mark the boundary," she said. Belle smiled. "With what money?" After he left, Tom pointed to the demolition notice. "They're afraid of this place." "So am I," Clara said. "Fear is useful when it makes us measure twice." That evening the gauge rose another 6 inches. At the same time, a vibration passed through the floor and a faint breath of warm, mineral-smelling air emerged beside the north wall. Clara lifted a cracked flagstone and found a cast-iron inspection lid. Its face bore 3 letters under lime, HMW. Not a company mark, initials. The lid was locked by a triangular spindle. Clara's father's tool roll contained a matching socket, worn smooth by years of use. She fitted it, but did not turn. The pressure behind the lid could not be judged. Instead, she drew its position, measured the chamber, and searched the stoker's room for ventilation routes. Behind a row of rotten coat pegs, she found a narrow slate board ruled into columns. Most chalk had vanished, but low winter light revealed scratches made by repeated writing, dates, water heights, and pairs of initials. MM appeared through 9 years. The last surviving line ended with EV closed, JB warned. Clara copied every mark. The slate was evidence that Matthew continued monitoring a supposedly disconnected station. It did not yet prove why. On Sunday, she walked to the parish church after service and requested access to the rate books. The church warden refused until the rector, who remembered Matthew repairing the school pump without charge, intervened. In records from 1848, she found the pumping station assessed together with Hannah Mere Water Meadow, Settling Beds, and Relief Race. In 1861, the meadow vanished from the entry without a recorded conveyance. Vane collieries had paid the lower rate afterward, but the old boundary description remained unchanged. The name Hannah appeared again in a burial entry. Hannah Wren Mowbray, engineer and proprietor, died 1859, aged 58. Clara had known Hannah only as her father's formidable aunt, a widow who wore men's boots and refused to enter the Vane house by the servant's door. Matthew said she designed pumps, but never said she owned one. The rector recalled a dispute. Sir Edmund's father purchased her coal leases, not all her waterworks. She established some kind of miner's provision, though lawyers argued it into silence after she died. Clara returned across the moor carrying a copied entry. Smoke rose from the station yard. 2 men had set fire to the sacking over her window. Elias was beating out the flames with his coat, while Tom dragged her valise into the snow. The fire did little damage, but her boundary drawings were scattered in the mud. A boot had ground the parish copy beneath its heel. Elias caught one intruder at the fence. The man tore free, leaving a brass button stamped VC. "Belle's Surface Gang," Tom said. Clara picked up the wet page. "A button proves where a coat was issued, not who wore it." Elias gave her a sharp, approving glance. "Your father would have said the same." Together they boarded the window and raised the chimney with salvaged bricks. Elias inspected the beam engine. Its main cylinder could be freed, but the old boiler was unsafe. A portable winding engine might drive the pump at low speed if they restored the gear and cleared the sump. Hiring one would cost more than Clara possessed. She chose a smaller victory. The station's hand pump drew brown water from the shallow well. Using gravel, charcoal, and clean sand in 3 discarded barrels, she built a filter and laid a frost-proof pipe to the road. The colliery cottages had relied on a fouled stream since the company's standpipe froze. At first, no one came. Then an elderly woman filled 1 pail, tasted it, and returned with 2 more. Clara charged a farthing per bucket only to cover charcoal and maintenance. By week's end, the queue reached the gate. Some women would not meet her eyes, but they watched her rinse the filter and record every sale. Mary Hesketh sent Tom with a penny and accepted no favor. The that water income bought bolts and tallow. Elias worked on credit for 2 hours each evening. Tom cleaned rust from gear teeth after school, though he told his mother he was carrying coal. Clara taught him to use a square and never place his fingers between a pawl and ratchet. When the gauge pulsed again, they compared it with the parish clock. The rise came at the change of shifts, when the active colliery pumps were throttled for inspection. Water was being forced east through a hidden connection whenever the main engine slowed. Clara placed her ear to the iron lid. Behind it she heard not one channel but two, a deep, continuous rush and a higher, intermittent trickle. The paired sounds explained the three pulses. A balance chamber must separate mine water from the relief race. On the final day before demolition, the parish surveyor arrived. Bell objected that snow concealed the markers. Clara led them to the northern edge of the pond, where Elias had uncovered a line of dressed gritstone. Each third stone carried a shallow H. The boundary ran beyond the fence and enclosed the sealed channel, pond, and inspection lid. The surveyor drove new stakes. "Demolition may proceed only if the chimney threatens land outside Miss Mowbray's parcel," he said. "It plainly does not." Bell's composure cracked. "Those stones could have been cut yesterday." Tom blurted, "Then why are there roots over the letters?" Bell struck the boy across the mouth. The action silenced everyone. Mary, who had followed the survey party, ran forward. Clara stepped between Bell and Tom. "Touch him again," she said, "and 20 witnesses will remember it more clearly than they remember your report." Bell left, but Mary did not thank Clara. She looked at the station and asked, "Will that machine bring Ben back?" "No." "Then be certain you are doing this for truth, not for your pride." The words followed Clara inside. She had imagined proving herself innocent, forcing Sir Edmund to lower his eyes, restoring the Mowbray name. Mary reminded her that innocence alone would not feed the widows or explain 20 deaths. That night Clara opened the iron inspection lid. She first drove a narrow test cock into the gasket. Air hissed, then stopped. No water followed. With Elias bracing the lifting chain, she turned the triangular spindle. The lid rose onto a brick shaft with iron rungs. 10 feet below lay a dry landing. A second locked door faced east, while a channel of black water ran behind a stone curb to the north. They descended with shielded lamps. Blue engineering bricks lined the chamber, their glaze preserving chalk marks. A brass differential gauge stood on the far wall connected to 2 pipes. One needle showed pressure from the active mine, the other showed the relief race. Between them hung a wooden board with removable ivory pegs arranged by height. Clara understood its purpose immediately. Hannah Mowbray had built a hydraulic warning system. When mine pressure exceeded the safe difference, a float shifted the pegs and released water through the eastern door. The system could drain a sudden influx without steam power, but the eastern valve chain had been cut. Fresh filings lay on the curb, protected from weather. Clara picked up a sawn link. Its surface was bright. Elias found a waxed cylinder inside a wall niche. It contained rolled linen tracings, not treasure. Sections of the mine, the mere, and a reservoir beneath common grazing land. Hannah's signature appeared on each, witnessed by 2 former miners. Notes in her square hand described a covenant requiring the relief works to remain operational wherever extraction crossed the eastern fault. One tracing was missing. A clean gap showed where it had been pulled from the bundle. Footsteps sounded above. The lid crashed shut. Darkness swallowed the shaft except for their lamps. Someone turned the spindle from outside. Then water began entering the lower chamber through a side pipe. Elias climbed and hammered the lid. Clara examined the incoming stream. It was clear, cold, and increasing. Bell, or whoever trapped them, had opened the hand flush valve to drown the chamber and destroy the tracings. Tom was outside. Clara had ordered him home, but his cap remained on a peg. She struck the eastern door with her wrench. It sounded hollow beyond. The cut chain had once operated its sluice, but the valve stem emerged through the wall. Using her father's triangular socket and Elias's chain wrench, she turned it a fraction. Mud groaned behind the door. "Again," she said. They pulled together. The valve opened. Water burst eastward beneath the door, dragging silt into a buried conduit. The chamber level fell. Air moved past them with the smell of wet limestone. Above, metal scraped. Tom's voice came faintly through the lid. He had seen Bell's foreman close it and fetched Mary. Together with 3 women from the water queue, she raised the spindle. Mary descended far enough to see the tracings and the cut chain. "Is this what Ben found?" "Part of it," Clara said. "He broke through old brick in the mine. He may have opened the other side of this relief system." Mary's face tightened. "Then why did the water take him?" Clara looked at the differential gauge. The active mine needle was now falling. Opening the eastern valve had reduced pressure. Because someone stopped the water from reaching here. They carried the tracings to the rector's stone vestry and placed them under seal before witnesses. Clara kept only her copies. Sir Edmund's solicitor arrived the next morning claiming Hannah's covenant was private, expired, and irrelevant to the collapse. He offered Clara £50 for the station, 10 times its likely auction value, provided she surrendered every document and left Derbyshire. She refused in writing. The offer revealed Sir Edmund's fear, but not his crime. The missing tracing likely showed the connection between the low founder seam and Hannah's relief race. Without it, the company could argue the system never extended beneath its present land. Clara searched the chamber again. The ivory pegs recorded safe pressure differences, but several were reversed, black ends outward. Tom noticed that their heights matched, not round feet, but the uneven spacing of letters on the slate board upstairs. When Clara laid a rubbing of the pegs beside the scratched columns, the black sequence spelled initials and dates. BHMMLF, followed by a repeated number, 7-3. "A measurement?" Tom asked. "Or a position?" On Hannah's sectional drawing, 7 feet 3 inches above the chamber floor aligned with the spring line of the eastern arch. Clara tapped the bricks there. One blue brick rang differently. Behind it lay a brass token, engraved BH, and a folded strip of oiled silk naming Benjamin Hesketh as an appointed inspector of the relief works, signed by Matthew 3 weeks before the collapse. Ben had not wandered into forbidden workings. Matthew had enlisted him to verify the system because he distrusted company management. Mary read the appointment twice. "He told me he had extra work, but not why. He said knowing less would keep us safe." Clara felt the cruelty of that protection. "My father did the same to me." Mary returned the silk. "Then let us not protect the dead men's children with silence." The widows began helping openly. One remembered Ben bringing home red clay on his boots from a level mapped as bare rock. Another had washed lime from a deputy's coat the day before the collapse. A third produced a pay token showing her husband had been assigned to clearance work, although the wage book listed coal cutting. Their recollections formed a pattern. Bell had ordered men to open an old brick barrier, then concealed the work. Clara believed Sir Edmund wanted access to an unregistered lower seam beyond Hannah's reservoir. By cutting through the barrier, the company could drain the reservoir into disused workings and extract the coal cheaply. Hannah's relief valve should have controlled the release. Someone had severed its chain and altered the pressure gauge so inspectors believed the system safe. Still, a question remained. Why had Matthew left the main pump room? Elias recalled the Old East key Matthew requested. It did not fit the chamber door. Clara compared it with a drawing of valve heads and recognized a double-bit key used on early sluice gear. The corresponding mechanism would be at the far end of the buried race, possibly beneath the mine itself. Reaching it required pumping out the station sump. Clara presented Hannah's plans and the parish boundary ruling to the Brierley Mutual Aid Society. She asked for a loan of £22 to hire a portable engine, promising repayment from water sales and future pumping contracts. The committee contained men who blamed her. Mary spoke first. "If she is wrong, we lose money," she said. "If she is right and we leave that water penned, we may lose more husbands." The society approved £12. A local quarry owner added 6 in exchange for a year of filtered water for his cottages. Elias deferred wages, and Clara sold her mother's silver brooch for the rest. It took 11 days to install the hired engine, align belts, replace rotten pump rods, and clear the suction basket. No miracle transformed the ruin. Rain entered through tarpaulins, a bearing overheated, the leather cups split twice. Clara slept 4 hours a night and recorded every expense. When the pump finally lifted its first black column of water, the beam moved only 6 strokes a minute, but people gathered at the fence to watch. The collecting pond fell inch by inch. At 7 feet, an arched mouth appeared in its retaining wall. At 9, Clara found twin rails descending into it and an iron trolley sunk in mud. The trolley carried broken bricks, stained with the same red clay seen on Ben's boots. One brick bore the impression of a maker who ceased trading in 1856, confirming that the barrier predated Vane's modern workings. At the tunnel mouth, they found Matthew's chain wrench. Tom reached for it, but Clara stopped him. Dark stains marked the handle. She wrapped it in cloth and called the constable. He had dismissed the first fire as trespass, but physical evidence tied to a missing man forced him to make a record. The tunnel beyond belonged within Clara's surveyed boundary for 30 yards, then passed beneath company land. The injunction barred them from crossing. Clara sent formal notice that uncontrolled water threatened her property and requested an inspection with company representatives, the parish surveyor, and a mines inspector from Sheffield. Sir Edmund answered with an accusation of extortion. 2 days later, the Mutual Aid Society received anonymous claims that its funds were being stolen. The quarry owner withdrew his carts. Customers at the water stand found dead rats thrown into the clean barrel. Clara closed it immediately, scrubbed the system, and posted Tom to guard the filters in daylight. Then the portable engine's governor failed. The flywheel accelerated until the building shook. Elias lunged for the steam valve while Clara pulled Tom behind the masonry pier. A connecting rod snapped and drove through the roof. The engine stopped with a shriek of metal. No one was injured, but the hired machine was ruined. The governor pin had been filed nearly through. Clara sat in the wet yard holding the 2 pieces. The hire company demanded £30 for damage. The sump began rising at once, swallowing the tunnel mouth they had labored to expose. Without proof of sabotage, the debt could force sale of the station. "This is what Bell wants," Elias said. "He can buy at auction and bury the whole place." Mary looked toward the women waiting beyond the gate. "Then we do not let it go to auction." Clara's exhaustion sharpened into anger. "Good intentions will not mend a governor or satisfy a court." Mary did not retreat. "No, but 50 households paying next month's water money today may satisfy the hire man." They raised £9 that evening in pennies and shillings. Elias found a used governor in Chesterfield. The hire company accepted half the repair cost after its mechanic confirmed deliberate filing. The constable added the damaged pin to his evidence bag beside the wrench and brass button. Clara had misjudged the reversal. She thought Bell's sabotage proved the station's importance. Instead, it nearly destroyed her credibility and endangered Tom. She forbade him to enter the engine house again. He shouted that adults had already kept him from the truth, and his father was dead because of it. Then he ran across the moor. Clara followed his tracks toward the active colliery. Near the spoil bank, she saw Bell's carriage and 2 men carrying a wooden case into an unused powder store. Tom crouched behind a wagon. Clara pulled him away before they were seen. "You will not make your mother bury you to help me," she said. "The case came from Mr. Bell's office. It had your father's name." They told Mary, who insisted on informing the constable. By the time he searched the store, the case was gone. but Tom had noticed pale clay on the carriage wheels. Only one road crossed such clay, the track to Hanamere above the eastern workings. The renewed pump exposed the tunnel again 3 days later. The mines inspector, Arthur Pennant, arrived by train with a clerk and instruments. Sir Edmund came in a black coat, Bell beside him. Under the inspection order they entered together. At 30 yards the tunnel met a stone marker establishing Clara's boundary. Beyond it, red clay smeared the floor. Pennant took samples. Farther east the passage divided. One branch ended at a recently rebuilt wall. The other climbed toward a valve chamber, where the old east key lay on the floor beside a torn strip of Matthew's coat. The main sluice stood half-closed. Its position would have diverted reservoir water away from Hannah's relief face and into the low-founder workings. Clara inserted Matthew's key. The mechanism moved freely, greased within weeks. Behind the valve housing she found the missing linen tracing, crushed into a drain. Bell stepped forward too quickly. "Company property," Pennant blocked him. "Evidence found during an official inspection." The tracing completed Hannah's system. It showed a safety reservoir beneath the mere, connected both to the eastern seam and to the pumping station. In an emergency, opening the relief sluice sent water harmlessly to the settling beds. Closing it while breaching the brick barrier would send the reservoir through the miner's level. Clara aligned the tracing with fresh chisel scars on the valve indicator. Its pointer had been removed and reset 90 degrees, just like the altered flood gauge. Ben and Matthew must have discovered the deception. Matthew came through the tunnel to open the sluice, but someone intercepted him. A low rumble interrupted her. Water sprayed from a joint in the rebuilt wall. Pennant ordered everyone back. Bell ran first, knocking his clerk into the channel. Elias hauled the man up. The wall bowed under pressure from the reservoir. Clara saw that retreat alone would leave the station and cottages below in the flood path. "The relief sluice must be opened fully." "The chain is cut at your end," Elias said. "This key controls it here." Sir Edmund seized her arm. "If you release the mere, you will flood my lower seam." "The lower seam is already flooded. That is why you abandoned 20 men." His grip loosened. In that instant, everyone understood he knew exactly where the water had gone. Clara turned the key. The old gearing resisted. Elias joined her, then Pennant. The rebuilt wall cracked. Bell tried to wrench the key away, but Tom's remembered description and the evidence bag had brought the constable behind the inspection party. He restrained Bell while the three of them forced the mechanism through its final quarter turn. Deep beneath their feet, iron gates moved for the first time in years. Water struck Hannah's relief race with a roar. The differential gauge needle in Clara's mind would be falling, pressure exchanging violence for motion. The cracked wall held. They emerged into daylight to see the station pond rising, then spilling through the old settling beds exactly as Hannah's drawings predicted. Reeds flattened under a broad, controlled sheet. No torrent reached the cottages. Pennant sealed the tunnels and placed the colliery under suspension. Sir Edmund attempted to leave. Mary Hesketh stood before his carriage with the widows behind her. No one touched him. Their stillness was more complete than any mob. "Where is Matthew Mowbray?" Pennant asked. Sir Edmund looked at Bell. Bell's public mask finally failed. "He was alive when I left him." The admission led searchers to the rebuilt wall. Behind it was a dry maintenance recess. Matthew's body lay there with his tin notebox, sealed by the same hurried masonry that diverted the water. His last entries recorded Bell's orders to breach Hannah's barrier, the altered gauges, and Sir Edmund's demand that extraction continue before an impending lease inspection. The final line stated that Ben Hesketh had gone to warn the night shift, while Matthew tried to open the east sluice. Ben had saved 11 men by delaying their descent. He and the others already below were trapped when Bell closed the relief gate to conceal the unauthorized reservoir breach. The inundation was neither Clara's error nor Matthew's cowardice. It was the calculated consequence of illegal extraction and a failed concealment. At the public inquiry in April, Clara did not rely on one dramatic document. She demonstrated the chain. Parish rate books established Hannah's ownership. Boundary stones and the deed established Clara's title. Brick stamps dated the original barrier. Pay tokens and widow's testimony proved the secret clearance work. Pressure records, altered pointers, the sawn chain and the restored hydraulic system explained the flood. Matthew's notes named the decisions, while Sir Edmund's attempt to prevent the emergency release showed his continuing knowledge. Bell claimed he acted to protect the company. His foreman confessed to the fire and sabotage in exchange for leniency. Sir Edmund denied ordering violence, but could not explain his purchase offers, the hidden tracing, or why Hanamere had been omitted from company plans while he acquired land above it. Bell was committed for trial on charges arising from Matthew's death, the entombment, and sabotage. Sir Edmund faced prosecution for conspiracy, falsification, and breaches of mine safety, as well as civil claims from the families. Vane collieries entered receivership. The inquiry formally cleared Clara and Matthew and recorded Ben Hesketh's attempt to warn the shift. The finding did not end the contest. Sir Edmund's barrister petitioned to exclude Matthew's tin box on the ground that no living witness could authenticate its contents. Clara spent 3 days comparing the notebooks with household receipts, earlier pump logs, and letters Matthew had sent to equipment makers. His habit of crossing the numeral 7, his mixture of engineers' capitals and cramped lowercase notes, even the brown ink he made from the same packet of powder all matched. Elias identified repairs he had performed from entries written years before the disaster. A Sheffield instrument maker produced an order in which Matthew had requested replacement springs for the differential gauge and described the hidden system without naming its location. More damaging to Sir Edmund was a letter discovered by accident rather than miracle. The receiver's clerks inventoried every paper in the colliery office. Among routine coal contracts lay a memorandum from Bell warning that the eastern reservoir could not be drained safely unless the old relief station was recommissioned. Sir Edmund had written across it, "No expense before the lease valuation, proceed unseen." The clerk who found it had once depended on Vane wages and hesitated to surrender it. Mary persuaded him, not with promises of protection she could not guarantee, but by showing him the names on the bean casting order. "You may decide whether another man's writing disappears," she said, "but decide while looking at those who disappeared with it." The memorandum entered evidence. Sir Edmund then claimed that "proceed" referred only to surveying. Bell, facing the prospect that every order would be laid upon him, produced a duplicate key to the powder store and admitted that Matthew's papers had been moved there after Clara reopened the sump. He also revealed where the wooden case had gone, lowered into a ventilation shaft on Hanamere. Recovering it required a winding tripod, 2 miners, and a day's cautious work. Inside were Clara's original drainage calculation, the station's last 9 years of pressure cards, and the missing company shift book. Waxed cloth and the dry upper ledge had preserved them. Clara's figure remained 6. Bell's altered copy read 8. Each pressure card showed the same dangerous surges she had recorded during her first night in the ruin, proving the mine had used Hannah's passages long after declaring them isolated. When the barrister suggested Clara might have manufactured the cards, Tom stood at the back of the hall with his jaw clenched. Clara did not appeal to indignation. She explained the clock-driven punctures along each card, the mineral stains left by the gauge pipe, and the progressive fading of ink purchased in separate years. Pennant confirmed that such features could not have been produced during the weeks since the collapse. Her trained eye, dismissed as unsuitable for responsibility, made the evidence intelligible. The coroner amended the causes of death. Compensation was assessed against the company estate. Because receivership could not satisfy every claim, Sir Edmund's personal liability became a separate action. His manor and racing stable were placed under charge. The families did not receive fortunes. After costs, each widow received enough for rent, food, and schooling, while the revived trust prepared longer support. Clara made certain nobody described those payments as charity. They were debts. Matthew was buried on a clear May morning. The company had denied him a place beside the miners when it called him a fugitive. Mary asked that he now lie at the end of their row, not above them. Clara agreed. She carried his triangular socket in her pocket, and placed no tool in the grave. His tools had work left to do. After the service, Tom admitted that he still dreamed of his father knocking behind brick. Clara confessed that she woke hearing the inspection lid close. They stood without pretending truth had cured fear. Then Mary gave Clara Ben's bait tin, cleaned but still dented. "Put it where apprentices eat," she said. "Let them know an inspector was also a man who carried bread underground." The tin later sat on an open shelf in the station classroom. It was never made into a relic too precious to touch. Tom used it to demonstrate how little food a 10-hour shift allowed. Before any new contract could begin, Clara ordered a complete safety survey. The results were sobering. The beam was cracked near its gudgeon, the north wall had settled 2 inches, the boiler house required rebuilding, and the settling beds held years of metal-rich sludge. Full restoration would cost more than £200 and take at least a year. Some trustees urged her to borrow heavily and reopen at once. "A machine that saves lives cannot begin by gambling with them," she replied. They divided the work into stages. First came drainage control, hand-operated sluices, a new alarm bell, and duplicate gauges visible both inside and outside the station. Next came clean water separation, so mine runoff could never enter the household supply. Only then would they install a permanent engine. Clara negotiated with the receiver for advance payments because the colliery benefited from every gallon removed. She insisted the agreement recognize Hannah's relief covenant and permit independent inspections chosen by the workers as well as management. The receiver called the demand unusual. Clara answered that secrecy had proved more expensive. Work exposed further pieces of Hannah's legacy. Her settling beds used grated reeds and limestone compartments to remove ochre from mine water before it reached Hannah Beck. Beneath the sludge survived iron frames for interchangeable screens, each numbered to correspond with the differential pressure board. The design was decades ahead of the crude practice of discharging orange water directly into streams. Clara did not claim it as her own. She sent measured drawings to the Institution of Mechanical Engineers under Hannah's full name and added observations from the restored system. The institution would not admit Clara as a member, but it printed an extract after Pennant endorsed the data. Quarry owners and 2 neighboring collieries asked to inspect the works. Clara charged commercial visitors a fee that went into the trust, while opening free inspection days for miners, apprentices, and village schoolchildren. Hannah's knowledge became valuable precisely because it was no longer concealed. The first summer brought trouble of a less dramatic kind. Dry weather reduced the spring flow, and water income fell by 1/3. A supplier delivered inferior leather cups that failed after 6 weeks. 2 trustees quarreled over whether widows whose husbands had worked only 3 months should qualify for support. Clara spent more hours on invoices and rules than on machinery. Restoration, she discovered, consisted largely of attending to small failures before they became disasters. Mary proposed a simple eligibility rule based on household need and time worked, with appeals heard by 1 widow, 1 minor, and 1 independent parish representative. The scheme prevented Sir Edmund's former favorites from controlling aid. It also meant Mary denied 1 claim from her own cousin. People who had expected partiality began trusting the fund. Elias suffered an inflammation in his damaged hand during autumn. He hid it until Clara saw him drop a spanner. She ordered him away from the engine for a fortnight and paid him from the sickness allowance. He protested that the work could not spare him. "That is what every unsafe company tells a man," she said. "We will not repeat it here." Tom and a second apprentice, Sarah Pike, completed the routine-bearing checks under Clara's supervision. Sarah was the daughter of a colliery carpenter and could calculate gear ratios faster than Tom, which offended him for precisely 2 days. Clara required both to keep separate logs, then compare them. A disagreement was not erased. It triggered a 3rd measurement. The practice grew from the altered 6 that had nearly destroyed them all. In November, heavy rain tested Hannah's system. Water rose 6 feet in the reservoir overnight. The outside gauge brought villagers to the station, frightened by memories of the collapse. Clara opened the upper gallery so they could watch the readings. Tom called each level, Sarah marked it publicly, Elias adjusted the engine. When pressure approached the warning peg, the relief sluice opened and the settling beds filled in measured sequence. Nothing was hidden, and therefore rumor found little room to grow. Mary stood beside the bell rope. "Do we evacuate?" "Not yet," Clara said. "Carts are ready, the school has been warned, and if the needle reaches the red pin, you ring 3 times. It stopped a finger's width below the pin, then descended. The station worked not because anyone trusted luck, but because each person knew the threshold for action. At dawn, children found the beck running high, but clear enough to see stones beneath it. That successful night secured the municipal water contract. It also persuaded the quarry owner to forgive the remainder of Clara's early loan in exchange for permanent representation on the inspection committee. She refused forgiveness and negotiated a slower repayment instead. Gifts made in gratitude could become claims of ownership later. Every obligation would be written plainly. Clara moved out of the stoker's room only after the workers had a dry meal room and the apprentices had benches. Her new quarters occupied 2 small rooms above the office, heated by a pipe from the boiler house. She kept the cracked deed framed behind a cupboard door rather than on public display. It reminded her that the property had first been offered as an insult, but she no longer needed visitors to admire the transformation. One evening, the former company clerk brought her a parcel returned from Sir Edmund's manor sale. It contained her father's brass level, confiscated from the pump room after his death. Clara cleaned the lens and found a shallow scratch along the casing. As a child, she had made it by dropping the instrument on a hearthstone. The mark proved nothing to a court, but it returned something the inquiry could not. The ordinary memory of Matthew laughing, checking the bubble, and making her take the measurement again. She used the level the next morning to set the foundation stones for the permanent engine. Justice did not restore the dead. Clara learned this when the decision was read, and Mary wept without relief. Vindication was not triumph. It was a clean place in which grief could finally stand. Hannah's covenant created a further difficulty. The relief works were not merely private property. Her signed plans and a counterpart found in the solicitor's archived packets established a trust. Income from pumping and water supply was to maintain the system, support injured miners and widows, and train 2 local apprentices each year. The trustees had become inactive after her death, while the Vanes used the works without honoring the obligations. Clara could have contested the trust and claimed the whole station. Instead, she petitioned to revive it. Her deed gave her the acre, buildings, and operating rights. The court-appointed scheme bound part of the income to Hannah's purposes. Clara accepted appointment as engineer and managing trustee at a salary fixed below the commercial rate, but sufficient for independence. The receiver contracted the station to drain the surviving western workings. A municipal board purchased filtered spring water for 3 settlements. Neither agreement made Clara rich. Together they paid wages, repairs, loan installments, and pensions. She published monthly accounts on a slate outside the gate, each figure open to inspection. Restoration took 18 months. The unsafe chimney came down course by course and was rebuilt. A new boiler arrived by wagon in sections. Elias supervised the engine fitters and accepted full wages, including every deferred hour. Mary administered the widow's fund, after insisting that pity had no place in its rules. Tom became the first apprentice, though Clara made him finish school mornings and learn arithmetic before touching a valve. Some villagers never apologized. One shopkeeper continued to call the disaster the Mowbray affair, as if guilt remained hereditary. Clara stopped waiting for universal affection. Trust grew in narrower, sturdier ways. A miner reporting a cracked pipe before it failed. A widow questioning an account without fear. A child filling a clean water jug beneath the brass plaque that explained Hannah's system. The deepest flooded galleries remained closed. The dead were not disturbed. At Mary's request, the names of all 20 men were cast into the restored beam, not as ornament, but along the working iron, where every stroke carried them through the building. Matthew's name was placed separately on the east sluice. He opened the way. Ben's appointment token went to Tom, who wore it only on inspection days. On the 2nd February, after Clara received the rusted key, snow lay over Brierley Moor. The engine house roof was sound, its windows glowed amber, and the great beam moved with the slow certainty of breath. Clean water traveled downhill to 3 villages. Beneath the floor, 2 gauges answered each other, never again hidden from those whose lives depended on them. Clara stood beside Mary as Tom read the evening levels aloud. 13 feet 1, 12 feet 10. Pressure falling within the safe difference. Your father used to say water did not lie, Tom said. It does not, Clara answered. But it needs someone willing to listen, and records anyone may read. He entered the figures on the public slate. Outside, women filled pails beneath a lantern while apprentices crossed the yard carrying tools. The station no longer resembled the woman who had arrived there, cast out and nearly penniless, nor did Clara resemble the ruin everyone expected her to become. Yet neither had been remade by forgetting its damage. The repaired bricks showed their different ages. The beam carried the dead. Clara's name stood beside Hannah's in the trust book, each line acknowledging what had been inherited and what must be passed on. As the engine completed another stroke, water moved safely through the channel that powerful men had tried to erase. Its sound filled the house. Not a warning now, but a promise kept in motion.